The morning was ordinary in every way. The sun rose over Bizen like it always did, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Birds sang their usual songs. Cars honked in traffic. Students complained about homework and tests as they walked through the gates of Haniel Academy. Yuna arrived early, as she always did. She was 17 years old, with long black hair tied in a simple ponytail and eyes that seemed to notice everything. Her classmates often said she was strange. Not in a bad way, but in a way that made people feel like she was always thinking about something deeper than everyone else. She took her usual seat near the window on the 3rd floor. From here, she could see the athletic field, the distant mountains, and the endless blue sky. She pulled out her sketchbook and began to draw. Today, she was working on a picture of her grandmother's hands, wrinkled and strong, holding a cup of tea. Her best friend, Hana, dropped into the seat next to her. Hana was the opposite of Yuna in every way. She was loud, dramatic, and always had something to say about everything. "Did you finish the math homework?" Hana asked, already knowing the answer. Yuna nodded without looking up from her drawing. "Can I copy it?" Another nod. Hana grinned and pulled out her notebook. Around them, other students filled the classroom. Jinho, the class president, was organizing papers at the front desk. Mira and Sujin were gossiping about a boy from another class. Dohan, a shy boy who sat in the back, was reading a book about space. Their teacher, Mr. Park, entered at exactly 9 a.m. He was a thin man with glasses and a kind face. He taught history, and he had a way of making even boring events sound interesting. "Good morning, everyone," he said, writing the date on the board. "Today we will continue our discussion about the Korean War and its lasting effects on our peninsula." Yuna kept drawing while she listened. She had heard these stories from her grandmother many times. Stories about running from bombs, about hiding in mountains, about losing everything and building it all back again. Her grandmother always said that Koreans were like bamboo. They bent in the storm, but they never broke. At exactly 9:14 a.m., the sky cracked open. There was no other way to describe it. One moment, the sky was clear and blue. The next moment, a line of pure white light split it in half, and something massive pushed through. It was a ship, but unlike any ship Yuna had ever seen in movies or books. It was black and angular, covered in strange patterns that seemed to move and shift. It was larger than the entire school, larger than the whole neighborhood, maybe larger than the whole district. The classroom went silent. Every student turned to the window. Mr. Park dropped his chalk. "What is that?" Hannah whispered. Yuna did not answer. She simply watched. More ships followed. Smaller ones, hundreds of them, pouring out of the larger vessel like insects from a hive. They scattered across the sky, heading toward the city, toward the mountains, toward everywhere. Then the screaming started. It came from outside first. People on the street, pointing at the sky, running in all directions. Then it came from inside the school. Students in other classrooms began to panic. Yuna could hear footsteps in the hallway, doors slamming, voices shouting. Mr. Park tried to maintain control. "Everyone, stay calm. Stay in your seats. I'm sure there's an explanation." But there was no explanation that made sense. Not when one of the smaller ships landed directly on the athletic field, crushing the soccer goals like they were made of paper. Not when the ship's door opened and creatures began to walk out. They were tall, perhaps 2 meters or more. Their bodies were covered in hard shells, like insects, but they walked on 2 legs like humans. They had 4 eyes, each one glowing a soft green. Their arms ended in claws, and they carried weapons that hummed with energy. Yuna counted 12 of them. They moved with purpose, spreading out to surround the school building. More ships landed in the distance. More creatures emerged. The classroom door burst open. 3 of the creatures entered. Their shells were darker than the others, and they wore markings that might have been symbols of rank. The one in front was the largest. He looked around the room with his 4 eyes, and when he spoke, his voice came from a small device on his chest that translated his clicks and hisses into Korean. Do not move. Do not resist. You are now property of the Vreth Dominion. Chaos erupted. Students screamed and dove under desks. Hannah grabbed Yuna's arm so hard it hurt. Myra fainted. Jinho tried to stand up, perhaps to protect someone, but one of the creatures pointed a weapon at him and he froze. Mr. Park stepped forward, his hands raised. Please, these are children. Whatever you want, we can discuss it. There's no need for violence. The lead creature, whose name was Tackle, though no one knew it yet, looked at the teacher with what might have been amusement. There is nothing to discuss. Your species has been selected for harvesting. Cooperation will make the process less painful. Harvesting? Mr. Park's voice shook. What does that mean? Tackle did not answer. He simply gestured to his soldiers, who began moving through the room, pushing students into groups. The strong-looking ones to the left, the weak-looking ones to the right. It was efficient and cold, like sorting fruit at a market. Yuna watched all of this without moving. She did not scream. She did not cry. She did not hide under her desk like the others. She simply observed, her sketchbook still open on her lap, her pencil still in her hand. This caught Tackle's attention. He walked toward her, his heavy footsteps making the floor shake slightly. The other students near her scrambled away, leaving her alone by the window. Hana was pulled to the left group, tears streaming down her face, reaching toward Yuna with desperate hands. Tackle stopped in front of Yuna's desk. He was so tall that she had to look up to see his face. His 4 eyes studied her, and she could see herself reflected in them, small and fragile. You do not fear, he said. It was not a question. Yuna considered this. She could feel her heart beating fast in her chest. Her hands wanted to shake, but she did not let them. She thought about her grandmother, who had survived bombs and hunger and loss. She thought about her grandfather, who had rebuilt his home 3 times after it was destroyed. She thought about all the stories she had heard about her people, about what they had endured and overcome. I am afraid, she said honestly. Her voice was quiet but steady. But fear is just a feeling. It does not control me. Tackle's mandibles clicked together. In 17 conquests across 3 galaxies, he had never received such an answer. Prey species always broke at this point. They begged, they cried, they promised anything for mercy. This small human girl did none of those things. She simply looked at him and waited. He raised his weapon and pointed it directly at her face. The barrel hummed with energy. 1 shot would end her life instantly. Yuna did not flinch. She did not close her eyes. She looked at the weapon, then looked back at him. That is an interesting design, she said calmly. The energy seems to spiral inside the barrel. Is that for accuracy or power? For the first time in his long career of conquest, Tackle did not know what to do. The fear was supposed to come now. The breaking was supposed to happen now. But this human child sat before him, asking about his weapons engineering, as if they were having a normal conversation. Something cold began to grow in his stomach. He did not recognize the feeling because he had never felt it before. Doubt. It was doubt. Tackle had conquered 17 worlds. He had seen species with scales, species with feathers, species made of liquid, and species that existed as clouds of gas. All of them had one thing in common. When faced with the power of the Vreth Dominion, they broke. Their will shattered like glass. Their resistance melted like ice in summer. This human girl did not break. He lowered his weapon slowly, still watching her face for any sign of the fear that had to be hiding underneath. But her eyes remained steady. Her breathing remained calm. She sat in her chair like she was waiting for a bus, not facing death. "What is your name?" Tackle asked. "Yuna. Yuna." He tested the word. It felt strange on his mandibles. "You are different from the others." Yuna glanced around the room. Her classmates were huddled in groups, crying and shaking. Mr. Park was trying to comfort a student who had vomited from fear. Hannah was calling her name, begging her to come to her, to hide, to do anything but sit there challenging the monster. "I am not different," Yuna said. "I am just waiting." "Waiting for what?" She thought about this question carefully. "I am not sure yet." Tackle made a sound that his translator could not convert. It was the breath equivalent of a frustrated growl. He turned to one of his soldiers. "Take her to the collection point with the others, but keep her separate. I want to observe this one." The soldier, whose name was Mika, approached Yuna with his weapon raised. She stood up calmly, tucking her sketchbook under her arm and putting her pencil behind her ear. She walked toward the door without being pushed or dragged. This small act of dignity affected the room more than anyone expected. Jinho, the class president, stopped shaking. He watched Yuna walk past him with her head held high, and something in his chest shifted. He stood up straighter. Duhan, the shy boy who loved space, looked at Yuna with wide eyes. He had always thought aliens would be wonderful and friendly. Now that they were here, terrible and cruel, he wanted to disappear. But watching Yuna walk with such calm made him feel ashamed of his fear. Even Mr. Park stopped his comforting and watched. He had taught history for 20 years. He knew that history was shaped by moments like this, by individuals who refused to be what others expected them to be. The Vreth soldiers marched the students out of the building and onto the athletic field. The ship that had landed there was even larger up close. Its surface seemed to absorb light, making it hard to look at directly. Hundreds of students from other classrooms were already gathered there, sitting on the grass in frightened clusters. Yuna was placed in a separate area, guarded by Mika. From here, she could see everything. She could see teachers trying to protect students. She could see the principal arguing with a Vreth officer and being struck to the ground. She could see helicopters in the distance, probably the military, being shot down by beams of light from the mothership above. She began to draw. Mika watched her with confusion. "What are you doing?" "Drawing." She did not look up. "Why?" This question made Yuna pause. She looked at her sketch, which showed the Vreth ship surrounded by the fallen helicopters. She thought about why she was doing this, what purpose it served. "Because someone should remember what happened here," she said finally. "And drawings last longer than memories." Mika did not understand. In Vreth culture, there was no art. There was efficiency. There was conquest. There was the expansion of the dominion. The idea of creating something just to remember was foreign to him. "Your species will not survive long enough for anyone to see your drawings," he said. Yuna nodded as if he had made a reasonable point. "Maybe, but I will still draw." Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky. More ships landed. More Vreth soldiers arrived. The students grew hungry and thirsty, but no food or water was given. Some students fainted. Others cried until they had no tears left. Yuna kept drawing. She drew the students, huddled together for warmth as the evening grew cold. She drew Mr. Park giving his jacket to a shivering girl. She drew Hannah, her best friend, looking toward her with red eyes and a desperate expression. She drew the Vreth soldiers standing guard, their 4 eyes scanning the crowd constantly as night fell. Tackle returned. He had been receiving reports from other landing sites around the planet, and the news was puzzling. Resistance was minimal, as expected. Humans had no weapons that could harm Vreth ships and no technology that could match Vreth power. But something else was happening, something the Vreth had never seen before. The humans were not breaking in soul. A group of office workers had locked themselves in a broadcasting building and were sending messages of hope across the country. In Daegu, a retired general was organizing civilians into networks of support and communication. In Jeju, fishing boats were evacuating people to hidden caves along the coast. None of this was violent resistance. But it was resistance nonetheless. Tak Cole walked to where Yuna sat, her sketchbook now half filled with images of the invasion. He looked at her drawings and felt that strange cold feeling in his stomach again. "Your people are not behaving correctly," he said. Yuna looked up from her work. "What do you mean?" "They should be surrendering. They should be offering themselves for processing. Instead, they are organizing." "Yes," Yuna said simply. "That is what we do." Tackle crouched down to be at her eye level. His 4 eyes glowed in the darkness. "Why are you not afraid? Your military has been destroyed. Your governments are collapsing. Your world is lost. Why do you still sit there with calm in your eyes?" Yuna thought about this question for a long time. The answer was not simple, and she wanted to explain it properly. "My grandmother lived through a war," she began. "When she was my age, bombs fell on her city every night. She lost her parents, her home, everything she knew. She ran to the mountains with nothing but the clothes she wore." Tackle listened. This was not the begging or crying he expected. She survived for 3 years in those mountains. She ate roots and leaves. She slept in caves. She watched friends die from hunger and cold. When the war ended, she walked back to the city and found only ashes. Yuna paused, looking at her sketchbook. There, among the drawings of the invasion, was the picture she had started that morning. Her grandmother's hands, old and wrinkled, holding a cup of tea. She rebuilt. She married my grandfather, who had also lost everything. They had children. They built a new home. They created a new life from nothing. She looked directly at Tackle. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "My heart beats fast. My hands want to shake. But my grandmother taught me that fear is a visitor, not a master. It comes, it stays for a while, and then it leaves. What remains is the choice of what to do next." Tackle stood up slowly. Around him, his soldiers were growing restless. The night was cold, and the humans were not cooperating the way they should. Processing was behind schedule. The commanders above were asking questions. "Your grandmother is one person," Tackle said. "One story. It means nothing." Yuna shook her head. "Every Korean has a grandmother with the same story. Every Korean has ancestors who survived invasion, occupation, war, and division. We have been conquered before, many times. But we are still here." She gestured to the students around her, the teachers, the ordinary people who had been dragged from their ordinary lives into this nightmare. "We are still here." For the first time, Tackle felt something he had never felt on any of his 17 conquests. He felt like he might be wrong. He felt like he might have made a mistake in choosing this planet. He did not show this feeling. He was a commander of the Vreth Dominion, and commanders did not show weakness. But as he walked away from the human girl with her sketchbook and her steady eyes, the feeling followed him. It would not leave for a very long time. The second day of the invasion began with rain. It was a cold, steady rain that soaked through clothing and chilled bones. The students on the athletic field had no shelter. They huddled together, sharing body heat, using jackets and bags as makeshift covers. Some cried. Some prayed. Some simply sat in silence, too exhausted to feel anything anymore. Yuna sat apart from the others, still in her separate area, still guarded by Mika. The rain had soaked her sketchbook, ruining some of her drawings. She held it against her chest, trying to protect what remained. Mika watched her with the same confusion he had felt since yesterday. In his experience, Prisoners did not try to protect art. They tried to protect themselves. They begged for food, for water, for mercy. This girl protected paper with pencil marks on it. "You are strange," he said. Yuna looked up at him. Her hair was plastered to her face, and she was shivering, but her eyes were still steady. "So are you." This surprised him. "I am strange? You stand in the rain guarding me, but you do not seem happy about it. You follow orders, but you do not believe in them. I can see it in the way you hold your weapon." Meika's grip on his rifle tightened. She was right, and he did not like that she could see it. He was a soldier, not a conqueror. He had joined the Vreth military to protect his colony, not to harvest other species. But orders were orders. "What I believe does not matter," he said. "It always matters," Yuna replied. "Beliefs are what make us who we are." Before Meika could respond, a commotion erupted near the main group of students. The Vreth soldiers were trying to separate some of the students for processing, but something was different today. Yesterday, the students had been paralyzed by fear. Today, they were pushing back, not with violence. With something else up, Mr. Park stood at the front of the group, his arms spread wide. Behind him, students linked arms, forming a human chain. When soldiers tried to pull someone out, others grabbed them and held on. "You cannot take them," Mr. Park said. His voice shook, but he did not move. "We will not let you." The lead soldier raised his weapon. "Move or die." Mr. Park did not move. "Then kill me. But the moment you do, you will see what humans do when you murder their teachers in front of them." The soldier hesitated. This was not supposed to happen. Conquered species did not challenge. They did not organize. They did not stand together against weapons that could destroy them instantly. From her separate position, Yuna watched with something warm growing in her chest. It was pride. Pride in her teacher, in her classmates, in her people. They were scared, all of them. But they were doing something with that fear, transforming it into something the Vreth had never encountered. Courage. The soldier looked back at his commander for guidance. The commander looked at Tackle, who had just arrived to investigate the disturbance. Tackle looked at the humans, at their linked arms and steady eyes, and felt that cold doubt spread deeper into his stomach. "Leave them for now," he ordered. "We will continue processing later." The soldiers withdrew, confused and frustrated. The humans did not cheer or celebrate. They simply remained linked together, protecting each other, waiting. Tackle walked to Yuna's position. The rain did not bother him. His shell protected him from weather that would harm softer species. He looked down at her, this small girl who had started something that was now spreading beyond her control. "Your teacher is brave," Tackle said. "Foolish but brave." Yuna nodded. "He teaches history. He knows what happens when people stop standing up for each other. What happens? They lose everything anyway, that they also lose themselves." Tackle considered this. The Vreth had no history in the human sense. They had records of expansion, lists of conquered worlds, statistics of harvested populations. But they did not have stories. They did not have lessons passed down through generations. They did not have grandmothers who survived wars. "Tell me about your history," he said. He did not know why he asked. Perhaps he wanted to understand this strange species. Perhaps he just wanted to hear her steady voice in the cold rain. Why and a thought about where to begin. There was so much history, so much pain and triumph and survival. She decided to start with something simple. Thousands of years ago, we were invaded by a neighboring empire. They had more soldiers, better weapons, stronger leaders. They conquered our entire peninsula in months. Tackle nodded. This was familiar. This was how things worked. We did not accept it, Yuna continued. We fought back. Not with armies, because we had no armies. We fought with farmers and fishermen and monks. We fought for 7 years, and we lost thousands of people, but we never stopped. And then, we won. They left. We rebuilt. Tackle's mandibles clicked skeptically. One victory proves nothing. It was not one victory. It was many. We were invaded again by a different empire. We fought for 6 years and won again. We were invaded again by yet another empire. We were occupied for 35 years. They tried to erase our language, our names, our culture. They failed. Yuna looked at him directly. Then came a war that split our peninsula in half. Millions died. Millions more fled. Cities were burned to the ground. For 3 years, the fighting continued. When it ended, we had lost everything. Half our country was gone. Our capital was rubble. Our people were scattered. She paused, remembering her grandmother's stories. 60 years later, that pile of rubble became one of the largest economies in the world. That broken country began sending aid to other nations. That defeated people began winning in arts, in technology, in medicine, in everything we tried. The rain continued to fall. Around them, other students were listening now. They had never heard Yuna speak this much, and her words carried across the wet field. "You ask why I am not afraid," Yuna said. "I am afraid. But I am also the granddaughter of survivors, the daughter of rebuilders, the sister of people who never give up. Fear is not new to us. It is an old friend we have learned to walk beside." Mecha, the guard who had been listening, lowered his weapon slightly. He looked at the other students, who were no longer cowering but sitting up straighter. Looking at him and his fellow soldiers was something that was not fear. It was patience. It was the look of people who knew that storms pass, that invaders leave, that history favors those who endure. Tackle felt the cold in his stomach spread to his chest. He had conquered 17 worlds. He had broken species that were older and stronger than humans. But he had never faced this. He had never faced a species that looked at destruction and thought, "We have survived worse." "Your history is impressive," he admitted, "but it will not save you. The Vreth Dominion has resources beyond your imagination. We have conquered species that were far more advanced than you." Yuna nodded slowly. "Maybe, but let me ask you something. Ask, of those 17 species you conquered, how many are still alive?" Tackle did not answer. The answer was complicated. Some had been completely harvested. Others had dwindled to small populations in work camps. None had thrived. None had grown. None had done anything but slowly disappear. Yuna smiled sadly. "We are not asking to defeat you. We are not even asking to fight you. We are simply asking you to understand that you cannot make us disappear. You can kill us. You can harvest us. You can take everything we have. But someone will survive. Someone always survives. And they will remember. And they will rebuild. And they will wait." She looked around at her classmates, at Mr. Park, at Hannah and Jinho and Dohan, at all the ordinary people who had become extraordinary simply by refusing to disappear. That is what we do. That is who we are. That is why you should be afraid of us. Tackle turned and walked away. He did not have an answer. For the first time in his life, he did not have an answer. The rain continued to fall. By the third day, the Vreth knew something was wrong. Their invasion plans had been perfect. They had studied Earth for months from orbit, learning the languages, mapping the cities, counting the population. They had calculated exactly how many soldiers would be needed, how many ships, how many processing centers. The numbers had been checked and double-checked. Everything should have worked. It did not work. The problem was not resistance in the traditional sense. Humans were not fighting back with weapons. Their militaries had been destroyed in the first hours. Their governments had collapsed or gone into hiding. By all measurements, they were a conquered species waiting to be harvested. But they would not cooperate. In Bizen, where Tackle commanded the southern sector, processing had fallen to 20% of projected rates. Humans who should have been walking quietly into harvesting centers were instead slipping away at night, hiding in mountains and forests, forming communities that could not be tracked. When soldiers found these communities and brought the people back, they simply waited and escaped again. It was infuriating. Tackle stood in his command center, which had been set up in what used to be a shopping mall. Screens showed him reports from around the planet, and none of them were good. In North America, entire cities had organized underground networks of food and medicine. In Europe, factory workers were sabotaging equipment that the Vreth needed. In Africa, communities were moving constantly, never staying in one place long enough to be processed. And everywhere. The humans were talking to each other. They used old radios that the Vreth had not thought to destroy. They used paper messages carried by hand. They used fires on hilltops, signals that could be seen for miles. They shared information, encouragement, and stories. Always stories. Stories about a girl in Bizen who looked at a Vreth commander and did not flinch. Tackle had not expected this. The girl's behavior had been unusual, yes, but he had thought it was just one individual. Now he understood that she had not been unusual at all. She had been typical. She had been what all humans were underneath their fear, waiting for a reason to emerge. He returned to the athletic field where the prisoners were kept. The rain had stopped, and a weak sun was trying to break through the clouds. The humans looked tired and hungry, but they were not broken. They sat in groups, talking quietly, sharing the little food they had managed to hide from guards. Some were even singing soft songs in a language Tackle did not recognize. Una was where he had left her, still guarded by Mika. She was no longer drawing because her sketchbook was too wet. Instead, she was talking to Dahan, the shy boy who loved space. The boy had been moved to her area yesterday after he had a panic attack, and Una had calmed him down by teaching him breathing exercises. Tackle watched them for a moment. The girl was explaining something about stars, about how far away they were and how long their light took to reach Earth. The boy was listening with wide eyes, his fear temporarily forgotten. This was what Tackle could not understand. They were prisoners. They were going to be harvested. Their future held nothing but pain and death. Yet here they sat, talking about stars like they were in a classroom on a normal day. He walked toward them. Mika straightened his posture, but Tackle waved him away. He wanted to talk to the girl alone. Una looked up at him. "You look troubled." It was such a strange thing to say. She was the prisoner. He was the conqueror. Why should she notice or care about his emotional state? "Your people are causing problems," he said. "I know, you know?" Una gestured toward the other students. "We talk. We hear things. We share information." Tackle looked at the groups of students and realized that they were not random. They were organized. Each group seemed to have a leader. Each leader occasionally spoke to other leaders. Information was flowing across the field in ways he had not noticed. How? He demanded. "We took your phones. We blocked your signals. How are you communicating?" Una smiled slightly. "You blocked our technology. You did not block our mouths. We have been talking to each other for 10,000 years. We are good at it." This answer made Tackle furious. He had conquered species with telepathy, species that communicated through chemical signals, species that could speak across vast distances without any technology. All of them had been easier to silence than humans, who simply talked to each other with words, one person at a time. "It will not save you," he said. "We have more ships coming, more soldiers. We will process every human on this planet eventually. Yuna nodded thoughtfully. Maybe. How long will it take? What do you mean? Your original plan probably assumed we would cooperate. That we would walk into your processing centers on our own. That fear would make us obedient. She looked at him steadily. That is not happening. So now you have to force us. Every single one of us. 8 billion people. Tackle did not respond. How many soldiers do you have? How much food? How long can you stay here, forcing people who do not want to be forced? These were questions Tackle had been avoiding. The truth was that the invasion force was sized for a cooperative population, not a resistant one. The Vreth Dominion had other conquests in progress, other demands on its resources. They could not afford to station a permanent occupation force on one difficult planet. We do not need your cooperation, he said. We can simply destroy you. You could, Yuna agreed. But then you would have nothing to harvest. You came here for resources, not revenge. What good is a dead planet? Tackle's mandibles clicked in frustration. She was right, and they both knew it. The Vreth did not conquer planets to destroy them. They conquered planets to use them. A destroyed Earth was worthless. Dohan, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. His voice was small and shaky, but the words were clear. In the books I read, advanced civilizations always have limited resources too. That is why they expand. They need more than they have. Tackle turned to look at the boy. What is your point? Dohan swallowed nervously, then continued. You are here because you need something from us. But taking what you need is harder than you expected. Every day we resist, it costs you more. At some point, the cost will be greater than the benefit. Yuna put her hand on Dohan's shoulder. He was shaking, but he did not stop talking. My father is an accountant. He says every decision is about numbers. The numbers for you are getting worse, are they not? Tackle stared at this boy, this small, frightened child who had just analyzed the strategic weakness of the entire invasion. He wanted to deny it, to say that the Vreth had unlimited resources and unlimited patience. But that would be a lie. The truth was that reports were already being sent to the Dominion. Command about the difficulties on Earth. Questions were being asked about timelines and costs. Other commanders were wondering if Earth was worth the trouble. You cannot win, Tackle said, but the words sounded weak even to him. We do not need to win, Yuna replied. We just need to not lose. There's a difference. That night, Tackle received new orders from the Dominion Command. They were told to accelerate processing, to use more force, to stop treating humans gently. But when the soldiers tried to implement these orders, they found that the humans had somehow organized themselves, even more effectively. Groups scattered before soldiers could reach them. Processing centers were found empty. Humans seemed to know where the soldiers were going before the soldiers got there. It was as if the entire planet had become a single organism, aware and reactive, protecting itself in ways that no individual could. Tackle stood alone in his command center, staring at screens that showed nothing but failure. For the first time since he began his career of conquest, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Outside, the humans continued to talk, to share, to survive. They did not know that they were winning. They only knew that they were still alive, still together, still refusing to disappear. That was enough. The order came on the 5th day. Tackle read it 3 times, certain he was misunderstanding. But the words were clear. All Vreth forces were to withdraw from Earth immediately. The invasion was being classified as a resource failure. The planet was to be marked as unsuitable for harvesting. They were retreating. In the command center, other officers reacted with disbelief. Some argued that they should stay, that with more time and more soldiers, they could break the humans eventually. Others were relieved. eager to leave this strange planet where nothing worked the way it should. Tackle felt nothing. He was numb. He had spent his entire career believing that the Vreth method was perfect, that fear conquered all species, that resistance was always temporary. Now he knew that was not true. Now he knew that some species were different. He made his way to the athletic field one last time. The humans did not know about the withdrawal yet. They were still huddled in their groups, still sharing food and stories, still waiting for whatever came next. When they saw the Vreth soldiers preparing to leave, confusion spread across their faces. Yuna stood up as Tackle approached. She looked tired and thin. 5 days of captivity with little food or water had taken a toll on her body. But her eyes were still steady. Her spirit was still unbroken. "You are leaving," she said. It was not a question. "Yes. Why?" Tackle considered lying. He could tell her that the Vreth were simply regrouping, that they would return with more forces, that Earth's fate was merely delayed. But he was tired of lies. He was tired of pretending that everything had gone according to plan. "Because we cannot afford to stay," he said honestly. "You were right. The cost has become greater than the benefit. The Dominion has decided that Earth is not worth the trouble." Yuna absorbed this information slowly. Around her, other students were beginning to understand what was happening. Whispers spread across the field. People started crying, but now they were tears of relief instead of fear. Hannah broke free from her group and ran toward Yuna, throwing her arms around her best friend. They held each other tightly, both of them shaking. Other students followed, gathering around Yuna in a circle of gratitude and love. Mr. Park walked forward and placed his hand on Yuna's head, a traditional gesture of blessing. "You gave us courage," he said. "When we had forgotten how to be brave, you reminded us." Yuna shook her head. "I did not do anything. I just did not give up. Any of you could have done the same. But you were the first," Dohn said. He was smiling for the first time since the invasion began. "You showed us it was possible." Tackle watched this gathering with complex emotions. He should have felt anger at his failure. He should have felt shame at retreating from a primitive planet. Instead, he felt something closer to respect. These humans had beaten him without throwing a single punch. They had won through pure stubbornness, through the simple refusal to accept defeat. They had turned fear into fuel and suffering into strength. He had never seen anything like it. "Commander." He turned to see Mika standing behind him. The soldier who had guarded Yuna for 5 days looked different somehow. His posture was uncertain. His eyes were troubled. "What is it?" Mika hesitated, then spoke quietly so only Tackle could hear. "I have been thinking about what the girl said. About beliefs mattering. About choices mattering." Tackle waited. "I do not want to do this anymore. Conquering, harvesting, watching species disappear. I thought it was necessary for the Dominion, but now I am not sure." This was dangerous talk. In the Vreth military, questioning the Dominion's methods was grounds for execution. But Tackle was tired, and he was beginning to question those methods himself. "Keep those thoughts to yourself," he said. "For now. But remember them." Mika nodded and walked away. Tackle wondered how many other soldiers were having similar thoughts. Perhaps the humans had infected them with something. Not a disease, but an idea. The idea that there might be another way to live. He approached Yuna one final time. The other students parted to let him through, no longer afraid of him, just wary. Yuna stepped forward to meet him, and for a moment, they simply looked at each other. "I want you to know something," Tackle said. "In 17 conquests, I have never met a species like yours. I have never met a species that looked at destruction and smiled. That looked at death and asked questions. That looked at defeat and saw an opportunity to endure." Yuna listened without responding. "Your planet was supposed to be easy. Your species was supposed to be simple. We were supposed to be here and gone in days. Instead, you have done something no other species has ever done. You have made us doubt ourselves." He paused, searching for the right words. "I do not know if we will return. I do not know what the Dominion will decide. But I know that if we do return, it will not be soon. And when we do, you will be stronger than you are now. You will have had time to prepare, to build, to grow. That is the gift you have given yourselves." Yuna finally spoke. "You could have destroyed us. You could have bombed our cities, poisoned our water, made our planet uninhabitable. Why did you not?" It was a fair question. The Vreth had done such things to other species in the past, species that proved too difficult to harvest. "Because destruction is waste," Tackle admitted. "And because you deserve better. You have earned the right to survive. Not through strength or technology, but through something we do not have. Something we do not understand." "What is that?" Tackle's mandibles clicked in what might have been a laugh. "If I knew, I would not be retreating." He turned to leave, then stopped. From his belt, he removed a small device, a data storage unit containing recordings of everything he had observed on Earth. Logs, videos, analysis. He tossed it to Yuna, who caught it with surprise. "Study us," he said. "Learn from us. Prepare for us. You will need every advantage when the next invasion comes. And there will always be another invasion. The universe is not kind to species that have no weapons." Yuna looked at the device in her hand, then back at Tackle. "Thank you." It was a strange thing to say to an invader, but it was genuine, and Tackle appreciated that. He walked back to his ship without another word. Around him, the other Vreth soldiers were loading equipment and preparing for departure. Within an hour, the field was empty except for the humans, who stood in clusters watching the ships rise into the sky. Yuna watched until the last ship disappeared into the clouds. Then she turned to look at her classmates, her teacher, her best friend, all the ordinary people who had survived something extraordinary. "What do we do now?" Hannah asked Yun a thought about her grandmother, who had asked the same question 60 years ago while standing in the ashes of her home. She thought about her grandfather, who had answered that question by picking up a brick and starting to rebuild. "We go home," Yuna said. "We find our families. We help each other. And we remember what we learned." "What did we learn?" Doan asked. Yuna smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. "We learned that we are stronger than we know. We learned that fear does not have to control us. We learned that when we stand together, even the most powerful enemies cannot break us." She looked up at the sky, now clear and blue, as if the invasion had never happened. But it had happened, and because of it, nothing would ever be the same. The humans began to walk. Some toward the city, some toward the mountains, all toward the uncertain future that waited for them. They walked slowly because they were weak and tired. But they walked together because they had learned that together was the only way to survive. Above them, the stars shone silently. Somewhere among those stars, the Vreth were retreating, carrying with them stories of a small planet that had refused to break. Those stories would spread through the Dominion, whispered in barracks and command centers, a warning to anyone who thought conquest was easy. On Earth, no one knew about those stories yet. They only knew that they were alive, and that tomorrow would come, and that they had work to do. Yun walked with Hannah on one side and Dohan on the other. Her sketchbook was ruined, but she could make a new one. Her drawings were lost, but she could create new ones. Everything that had been destroyed could be rebuilt, because that was what humans did. They rebuilt. They survived. They endured, and they never, ever gave up.